Now, we talk a lot about our two-party system. We have two dominant political parties. That means that presidential candidates who are not running in one of those parties have really no chance of winning. So Gary Johnson or Jill Stein might claim that the election is rigged against them. That means that they are systematically disadvantaged based on our two-party system. So that's the first sense.
Yeah, and so about that, since we're being analytic, I think it's maybe relevant to point out that the system wasn't rigged against Johnson or Stein per se, but against their parties, the Libertarian and Green parties. I don't think that Johnson was so much more libertarian than Rand Paul, and Stein's policies weren't out of step with the Democratic platform. It was just their choice to run as third-party candidates. But I don't know if that's either here nor there. But, to be honest, I'm not that worked up about this two-party system issue, because if you look at parliamentary politics, you'll see issues with their systems as well, and their proliferation of parties. And, in fact, this is a bit of an American history throwback. When you look at the early 1800s, people thought it was a disaster that we had so many parties. Martin Van Buren, he boosted the two-party system in order to prevent sectionalism from ripping the country apart. So it's not like there's nothing to be said for a two-party system. But if you want to talk about ways or mechanisms in which it rigs the system against third-party candidates, I think the two most salient are thresholds at various points, like getting on to televised debates and getting onto ballots in the primaries, and also the fundraising capabilities of parties. The fundraising capabilities are something that third parties really don't have much of, and that is a huge disadvantage given the role of money in politics.
I think if there's a point to be made about the two-party system and ways in which the American political system is biased against or disadvantages third parties, it's likely best made at the congressional level, not at the presidential level. Justin, I think you're right to say that Johnson and Stein aren't necessarily so out of step with the platforms you can compare them to, although you might argue that Rand Paul is a bit out of step with most of the rest of the Republicans. At the same time, on the congressional level, you could argue that in many areas the Democrat-Republican system might not cover as wide a range of political beliefs as we would like, and so there are many people in the system who feel as if they're not being represented properly. And on the congressional level, at any rate, you could argue that this is just directly a problem with first-past-the-post voting, where the person who receives the highest number of votes wins, as opposed to a system where preferences of each person are ranked, and a candidate that was second place could, in the pure number of votes, could turn out to be the winner in the end if the weighted preferences of everyone shaped out that way. So I think there is something to be said about the way in which the election is, so to speak, rigged against third parties. But at the same time, I agree with you that in large part, it's not a problem that arises at the presidential level.